everybody, and welcome to Tiger Sidelines. Regional cable stars are here. That's Dave Matter. That is Gabe DeArmond. I'm Bo Bayman. Thanks for joining us right here on MC22. The bye week is now, the first bye week is now over. Yeah. The Tigers didn't play last week, and as you looked at some of the scores, things got interesting in the SEC, which we'll touch on in a minute. But first of all, through the bye week, Dave, we talked about it last week. You guys have written about it. Barry Odom has said we had to change something because when they've had extra time to prepare for a game, which they have for the upcoming Troy game, they've fallen flat.
Yeah, I think what will help the most is playing Troy and not playing Florida or a good Kentucky team. So we'll see what happens on Saturday. But, you would think they come out fresh after this one. They didn't really have injuries other than the Trajan Jeffcoat, which has lingered forever, and Yasir Durant is something to obviously keep an eye on this week. But they should be in good shape. Is it a good time for a bye? We get asked that all the time. It doesn't matter if it's good or not because it's going to happen anyway, and you just have to make the most out of it.
So the Tigers get ready for Troy, and it is a little interesting to go into another non-conference game after the bye. Yeah. I mean, you don't usually see that, but it could be helpful.
And again, the last three byes have been road games. Florida, Kentucky, South Carolina. You'd like to have won one of them. South Carolina wasn't great last year, but the Kentucky game 2 years ago was, I think, the one they lost when the referees just kind of walked around with the ball for 15 seconds.
Yeah.
It's not like they've been awful out of the bye the last couple of years. I think more than 0-3 out of the bye, the bigger deal is 0-7 with time to prepare. So it's the season openers and the bowl games that are kind of skewing our opinion of this. Just coming out of a bye, I don't think they've been that bad.
I don't think so either, but they will get skewed on what they think when they saw what they saw at Wyoming. They prepared, and they lost that game.
Right, and that stain on the schedule is going to be there until they do something they're not expected to do in a positive way, whether that's beat Georgia or manhandle somebody.
And even then,
it's still out there.
Missouri could finish this season 11-1, and I promise the first thing we're hearing is, well, we'd be number one in the country if we just would have beat Wyoming. It's the first thing.
And that's how much of a stain that is, isn't it?
It's similar to 2014. That team won 11 games, won their bowl game convincingly, won the East, but people still remember Indiana.
Yeah, right.
They lost at home to Indiana.
And that's going to be, the Wyoming game is going to be one that people talk about when they look back on 2019. They're going to say, boy, that was a pretty good team. We had a pretty good year. I hate that we lost to Wyoming.
You can't change it.
I
don't know what you do about it. It happened. I don't particularly tend to see the point in looking back, but then again, I don't talk about the New Mexico game in 2006 either. So
to that point, I would imagine that the Tigers don't want to be sloppy. If they want to clean up anything coming out of an off week, make sure there's no rust.
Right.
Make sure there's no turnovers, because that's what beat them in Wyoming.
Turnovers, and you don't want to add penalties. They've been penalized a bunch this year, and it hasn't really affected them much, but in a close game, they can really hurt you. And the thing about Troy is, and this is not about this year's Troy team, because they're 2-2 and they're not all that good. They've gone into the house of Power 5 teams before and not only played close, but they've won. They beat LSU a few years ago. They beat Nebraska last year. They played. It still sort of counts. They played Oregon tough not too long ago. They've played a bunch of SEC teams before. So that program, when you come into that program, I think there's an expectation that, hey, we're not going to be afraid when we go into these Power 5 stadiums.
Well, and the other thing that Missouri fans will remember is the Brad Smith team that lost at Troy.
Right.
So many years ago.
Let's be honest. Missouri's in some trouble with DeMarcus Ware's playing defensive end in this game. This Troy team gave up 50 to Arkansas State last week. They gave up 47 to, one of the Louisiana schools, I think, a couple weeks ago. Missouri should score some points. They're a 26-point favorite. As big of an upset as Wyoming was, this would be bigger.
Yeah. The other thing that we learned this week, and this is a 3 o'clock game coming up, is we learned that homecoming against Ole Miss is going to be a 6 o'clock game. Plenty of time for people to get juiced on homecoming, and I don't know if the crowd will be huge, but it has the chance to.
Why wouldn't it be?
Right.
4-1, homecoming.
Ole Miss.
The game time that everybody says this is when it has to be. If it's not, look, I'll throw some shade at Missouri fans for the South Carolina game. But if you don't have 60 for that one, then that's all your fault, assuming they beat Troy.
I don't know what more you can ask for. I mean, that's the game time everybody wants.
But they lost to Wyoming.
That's true. Yeah. So there's no reason to come to the next, a game a month and a half later. You know what's funny is that Missouri. Now they don't like the fact they never get night games. This will be their first home SEC night game since 2017. They're only in the SEC. They're only 3-9 in games in the evening. So this idea that this jacked up crowd at night helps them, it hasn't really.
And this one is a little bit different because generally the night games tend to be against better teams.
Yeah.
Right.
You're playing Georgia at night, maybe Florida. This game, I mean, Ole Miss is not very good either.
No.
It's funny because a lot of people have that clouded judgment, and the only thing they remember is that Oklahoma win.
Right.
They don't remember the Thursday night against Nebraska when Ndamukong Suh took care
Mississippi
of.
State was a Thursday night
Yeah.
game.
The last time they played Auburn here, that was a night game.
So all those night games certainly haven't gone Missouri's way. Let's look around the SEC. The one that just stood out to me, mainly because we just saw them, was South Carolina looked like a different team at home than we saw at Faurot Field.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two things. First of all, South Carolina looked decent against Bama, decent against Kentucky, so maybe Missouri deserves credit for them not looking good. But Kentucky is everything on the negative side that everybody thought it was going to be coming into the season. They lost everybody on defense. They have no quarterback.
Right.
Like, they are going to put, I think, a wide receiver at quarterback this week.
Yeah, the guy that they've been starting after the starter got hurt was the guy who left Troy. So, that it was not going well for them. I think everybody expected them to fall back a little bit from winning 10 games last year, but to be this bad all of a sudden, man, it's pretty fast.
With the results that happened this weekend, did Missouri's path become clear to having to have 9 wins?
Yeah, I mean, I've said this, I think I said this a couple weeks ago, but it now is official that Missouri will not face a team with a winning record at kickoff between West Virginia and Georgia.
Wow.
And I mean, I can't imagine that happens in Power 5 leagues very often because that means everybody's bad. Everybody's losing non-conference games. I mean, that assumes Kentucky doesn't beat Georgia. If Kentucky beats Georgia, they'll probably have a winning record. But, I think Arkansas took their one shot for the season this weekend, and it still wasn't good enough. Tennessee didn't lose, though, so that was good for them.
Good for them.
Their fans probably celebrated, a little bit. But as you look to the West, I mean, Alabama's now the new #1 team in the country after Clemson struggled with the Fighting Mac Browns of North Carolina. I mean, to me, the showdown is going to be LSU, Alabama, and then you also have Auburn, Alabama. Alabama's got a little tough road here.
Auburn had a pretty eye-opening win this weekend, just trashing Mississippi State. A game that I think going into the season is kind of a toss-up. But Mississippi State's not as good as they have been. They lost so much on defense, but Auburn is just unstoppable on offense suddenly. And you add that to a really good defense. I think we should talk about them in the same breath as Alabama and LSU and Georgia right now.
If you just look at what they've done on the field, Auburn might be the #1 team in the country. I mean, I think it's either them or Ohio State. And then probably 3, 4, 5 are Georgia, Alabama, LSU in some order. So the SEC is so weird because I think they legitimately have 4 of the top 7 teams, maybe 4 of the top 5 teams in the country. And then they kind of don't really have any. I mean, I know Florida's ranked 9th, but does anybody expect Florida to even beat Auburn this
Well,
week?
they still have Auburn, LSU, and Georgia before they see Missouri. So, they could have 3 losses.
And they're at South Carolina.
And South Carolina plays differently at home. It will be an interesting league coming up. Elsewhere around college football, the biggest game of the week was that Ohio State-Nebraska. That's where game day was. Nebraska was so pumped up for it, and they got housed.
Absolutely.
I mean, they shouldn't have been on the same field as Ohio.
The idea that team was nationally ranked at the beginning of the season coming off a 4-win year, I mean, what were people thinking on that one? And Ohio State, I know you just said they might be the best team in the country. They might be the most complete team. Last year they didn't have a defense, and it really cost them. They're loaded now on both sides of the ball. And, they don't have as many tests as Alabama will have in their own conference. I mean, they've got Michigan, but who else is going to test them? Maybe, but I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they have Wisconsin at home. No real big upsets this week. I mean, this was a terrible week for college football.
This is the 3rd week in a row that I've looked at games and go, when do we start getting good games?
I know it.
And I really think the reason is because there's 7 teams that just are in their own league. And then everything else, maybe number 13's playing number 22, but like neither one of them's really a very good team.
Yeah.
you've got 7 great teams and 50, I'll watch it because nothing else is on teams.
Let's talk about this. North Carolina and Clemson. North Carolina has a chance to upset them, and they go for 2. I love that call.
I like it. I don't like it if it's the other way around. Because Clemson, the longer the game goes, the better team is going to win. That's the thinking. So, yeah, I don't mind that call at all for Mac Brown. I mean, it's excruciating when you don't get it. But for that program to be where it's been, to have a chance to win a game on one play, I think you got to take it.
Like the decision, hated the play call.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
but here's the other thing. We're talking about rankings and all that. Here's why they're so stupid. Why is Clemson number 2 in the country? Because we think they are? I mean, they've done nothing to earn being the number 2 team in the country. Trevor Lawrence out of the Heisman race. There's no way he wins it. Clemson is not going to have a good win all season long. I guess they'll get in the playoffs if they're 12 or 13-0, but every other team we've talked about has looked better.
It is strange that everyone's kind of written off Trevor Lawrence well, he can't, be in the Heisman race. Look at what he's done. Kelly Bryant's numbers are better by every measure, which is kind of odd. They are. But why is Clemson still considered elite?
Yeah.
Even though what they've done is not very impressive either.
Because of what they've done the last 4 years.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, LSU, Georgia, Alabama, and Auburn will all knock each other off and knock each other out, and Clemson will be there because they don't have to play anybody. And I will say this about North Carolina. Playing toe-to-toe with Clemson, I know this is way down the line, transitive property, but that was a good game, North Carolina and South Carolina, to start the season. So, again, to your point, Gabe, that you said earlier, maybe we should give Missouri more credit for the win they had over the Gamecocks.
North Carolina also lost to App State.
Yeah.
Who's
undefeated.
So, who knows?
Yeah, so you never know. But we will talk about, finally, a football game next week when we talk about Troy. But up next, we're talking about your tweets. We check the tweet machine up next on Tiger Sidelines right here on MC22. Welcome back to Tiger Sidelines, everybody. That's Gabe DeArmond and Dave Matter, and I'm Bo Bayman. Time to check our tweets. We are at Tiger Sidelines every single week. The first one comes from Bob. It says, does the South End Zone facility offer improved media areas for interviewing? In other words, more space. And does the coach's press conference room reside in there?
Yeah, I mean, it's been better. We don't have to walk across the bridge. I don't know where visitors do interviews, honestly, but
they do it where we used to do it. In that room.
Oh,
There's
downstairs.
still a room down there.
So they get a room.
Yeah. It saves some time. It's fine. It's been good.
I mean, the truth is, very few people care about what we have to do after the game anyway,
though. There's a couple of tweets about Chase Daniel. Chase Daniel obviously getting in for the Bears. And one was from Albert Breer, who said he might be the greatest player of all time. Career starts 4, career earnings $34.3 million.
Yeah, that's about to change because he's going to start a few games.
Yeah.
I saw they said Mitch Trubisky isn't having surgery, but I have a hard time seeing how at no point he's never gotten a shot to start in the NFL. I mean, every time he's been out there, he's played pretty well.
Right. He's made really smart career choices too because he's gone to teams that he knows the offense. He kind of followed Peterson around from the Chiefs to the Eagles. And that system is similar to what Nagy runs in Chicago. But yeah, now is his shot. And he's had some opportunities before to start a game or two. But he's got a great defense on his side too, so he doesn't have to do a whole lot to screw things up.
So Chase Daniels made $34 million in the NFL. Anybody beat him in the NFL? And then Max Scherzer has beat him.
From Missouri?
Yeah, from Missouri.
I'm sure Justin Smith.
He's
made
close
more
to
than
100 million career earnings when you look up his contracts. Yeah.
And what about Max? Max has got to be.
Max made $34 million last month.
Yeah. I mean, his deal, 8-year deal or whatever, was worth a lot.
Tigers heavy favorites against Troy, says Scott. If the unthinkable happens and they lose, how hot is Barry Odom's seat? Who cares because they're not going to lose?
He's not getting fired this year. I mean, barring disaster, which would mean not only losing to Troy, but losing like 4 or 5 more. Right. And you're not doing that with
You're not dominating South Carolina, West Virginia, and then losing to several more teams on the
We don't have to make every game a referendum on whether we're firing the coach on Monday or not.
Yeah.
It's senseless.
And let's be honest, if they go 9-3, he's probably getting a raise.
Probably. I mean, there's not a lot of money to kick around.
At least some years added.
Yeah. I mean, if they get if the postseason ban is upheld, there's not a lot of money to throw around at Barry Odom.
Who has been the biggest surprise of the guys this year in practice? I have to wonder if that's basketball.
Oh, well, they just started practice last week.
And we've seen
we
none
don't
of it.
see it. So,
So, yeah, and if it's football, I don't know, because we see 45 minutes a week and frankly don't really pay a lot of attention.
they stretch well.
Yeah. Talking about basketball, however, let's just throw that in here for a second. You guys got to meet with Konzo last week as they get geared up for another run.
Yeah, and players, and I think the only thing to really come out of it was he said something that a lot of people have been wanting him to say, which is, we're going to go Jeremiah Tillman and 4 guys on the perimeter that can shoot. Because I think a lot of us watched them last year and thought that was their best chance to be good. And they didn't do it very often, but it sounds like they're going to do it a lot this year.
Yeah, last year, they get Tillman and Puryear down low, and Kevin, God bless him, he wasn't the most athletic, and he really couldn't play on the perimeter, and they were so slow. They just couldn't do much. They didn't have enough shooters or drivers out there. Now they're going to look a lot different.
And the truth is, realistically, this team still has nothing behind Jeremiah Tillman.
Yeah,
because
that's right.
I think the only backup that's going to play any real minutes is Mitchell Smith. Well, he's a perimeter guy. He may be 6'10", but he is not a low block guy in the SEC. So, Reed Nico's going to play 5 to 8 minutes. Axel Okongo, we still don't really have any proof as a human being that exists. So who knows?
And the Tigers got a big commitment out of
big, literally
7'3" guy for 2020.
Who will be here next year, which again was kind of weird to me that it literally happened the day after Konzo told us how they were going to play small and everything, and they get a commitment from a 7'3" guy.
So they'll have some size. Okay, here's Chris kind of going the other way on the Barry Odom thing. After 4.5 years of hindsight, maybe Odom is the best man for the job. Fuente's floundering, Campbell's rebuilding, Dykes, Calhoun, Wells, and Bobo just Did Mizzou get its man?
Matt Rule's done a good job at Baylor. That's people lose sight of. That's the only guy who was actually offered this job and didn't take it. That was Mack Rhoades' first choice. I know he talked to Matt Campbell, who's done a good job at Iowa State. If you compare him, Dino Babers at Syracuse, and Barry Odom here, they're all pretty similar.
Right.
And you can argue which program was worse when they started and which one's better today, but they've all done about the same thing.
Yeah, and, a different AD might have had a different pool of candidates, too.
Right.
So let's just not limit it to who Mack Rhoades was looking at. Does that mean it was the greatest hire? It's worked out fine. Who's to say if Barry Odom went somewhere else, he'd have the same record, or maybe if one of those guys comes to Missouri, they have a better record. But I think it's fine. It's hard to compare what other guys are doing inside other situations.
Yeah, but you can see the path to where in a couple of years we're going to go, hey, this worked pretty well.
Yeah.
But as evidenced by our questions, you're as good as the last game you played.
Yeah,
so
no question.
nobody's going to, if they lose this week, nobody's going to be asking next Tuesday, hey, is Barry Odom the best guy they could have hired?
The other point, too, that gets lost to me is not unlike Gary Pinkel. I don't think Barry Odom, if he sustains success, he's not going to go anywhere.
Well, you wouldn't
I don't
think
know.
so. Last year there were the Louisville rumblings that were obviously created by somebody, and that might have just been to get a raise.
It wasn't Jim Sturck and it wasn't Louisville.
Right. So, yeah, I think Gary was a guy that he didn't like moving. He physically didn't like moving and starting over, meeting new people, and having to do all of that again. We don't really know if that's, Barry's way of looking at things. If one of the Oklahoma jobs comes open sometime and he's a good enough candidate, I think he's a natural fit down there. It's home. You just don't know.
Yeah, you can't say, let's say for argument's sake he goes 10-2 this year, and then somehow goes 10-2 again next year, and somebody calls and says, we want to pay you $5 million a year. Who at Missouri pays that?
Yeah, that's right.
So it's easy to think he's not giving the hometown a discount of $1.5 million a year,
Maybe we could have the Missouri legislature, make a ruling about, instead of paying the athletes, we could pay coaches.
I think they get paid. I think they get paid all right.
They could find it somewhere.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for all the tweets. Don't forget, we're at Tiger Sidelines on Twitter. You can send us your tweets every single week. We got one more segment to go. Stick around. You're watching Tiger Sidelines on MC22. Welcome back, everyone. Gabe, Dave, and Bo here on Tiger Sidelines on MC22 as we look around the landscape on the volleyball court. It was one loss for the Missouri Tigers, but It was an SEC loss. They've lost their third in a row. They're now 8-3, but they're 0-1 in conferences. They lost to Kentucky, and I believe Kentucky swept them.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, it was a sweep. This week it's Wednesday LSU and Sunday Texas A&M for the volleyball team. The soccer team had a tough one on Sunday. They lost to Georgia 5-1. And so, again, we said build up the resume early because when you get into the SEC, it's going to be tough, and that's how it's turned out through the early portion so far.
Yeah, that volleyball team had so much momentum for a while, and then they just they went on the road and kind of hit the skids now. They need something good to happen.
They need to turn it around. Both programs do. As we look at college football, a couple of good games this weekend. The one that's going to be the highlight of the SEC is Auburn, Florida.
Yeah, and this is a huge game for Missouri fans because, if you look at it, Florida probably should lose 2 or 3 games in this league.
Right.
But if this is a win, all of a sudden you start looking at, Missouri can win the East without beating Florida, but if this is a win, Missouri probably can't win the East without beating Florida. Right. Now this all assumes that Georgia's going to lose a game somewhere, but Georgia's schedule, I looked at it, their last 4 SEC games are Florida, Missouri, Auburn, and A&M. So They kind of backloaded everything after what should be a 4-0 start.
And none of us were impressed with A&M last week.
No, and you give Arkansas some credit. They made some things happen. They showed some life. They still have not won an SEC game under Chad Morris, I believe.
Yeah.
But that one, they had a shot late. A&M just, man, they're the one thing they've done well this year is not get blown out by Clemson. Like, what else have they done? Yeah. They beat Lamar and Texas State and a terrible Arkansas program.
And Arkansas is really, really reeling. And, they just cannot turn the corner.
They have the misfortune of not playing Tennessee or Vanderbilt this year, I think. If they did, they might be able to get a win. Vandy is at Ole Miss. It's a terrible game, but it's Missouri's next opponent. So Vandy finally got a win last week and looked not all that impressive doing it. So it really is. There's 4 really good teams in this league, and then 3, I think, in Missouri, Florida, and A&M that we're looking at and going, they might be good. We're not sure, but they might be good.
And Georgia this week, if I'm not mistaken, plays Tennessee, right?
Yeah, that should be ugly. There's no reason to expect Tennessee to be barely competitive.
Did you see Kirby Smart's quotes yesterday? He said at his press conference that Tennessee, quote, is on the verge of something special. I don't know if that word means what Kirby thinks it means, but, and he was like, and then Jeremy Pruitt is not releasing a depth chart because he doesn't want to give away anything to do.
Well, that's going to fix
They don't
everything.
care who you're playing. They are better, and they're going to win.
They can just prepare for what they do, and they'll be fine. Did Kirby Smart say that with a straight face?
I don't know. I didn't. I just saw the quote. It really, it makes our job seem kind of meaningless, but coaches' press conferences don't even need to happen.
Yeah.
You never need to ask about the next team because they're all extremely well coached, very physical. They really run to the ball, do a lot of things on defense. On offense, they want to be balanced, have a good run game, they block well.
Sound on special teams.
Yeah, really have guys that can throw and catch. It's going to be a big challenge.
And that's what it'll be for Missouri against Troy this week.
I just gave you Barry Odom's opening statement. A lot of respect for Troy coach.
Chip Lindsey.
A lot of respect for Chip Lindsey. Yeah.
And his program he's built
I just
there.
learned that. So.
But as you look at this game, this just has to be, I don't want to say a roll out the helmet game, but it's just got to be one of those games that Missouri goes and does what it does and moves on.
You raise red flags if it's close in the second half. That's basically it. They might give up some points. Troy can move the ball. They have historically. They can't stop anybody. And their best players are running back. He's out for the season with a knee injury. So there's no excuses for Missouri.
I'm not sure I actually do raise red flags anymore. The more you watch college football, I don't know, just score one more point than they do and move on. I don't know that indicates they'd be bad next week, but given Missouri's schedule, the next game that they are allowed to lose is probably Georgia. Yeah. They need to be 7-1 going into that game.
And there'll be a lot of hype surrounding that game if they get there to 7-1.
Yeah.
Because you got to imagine Georgia probably hasn't lost, right? At that point?
They
played Florida
before them.
And Jacksonville, and weird things happen in that game.
Yeah, no doubt about it. But, there's a chance that could be a spotlight game if it's 8-0 and 7-1.
It should theoretically be for what amounts to a stranglehold on the SEC East. Now, whether that would mean Missouri could play in the SEC title game, nobody knows.
Right. It's the same day as LSU Alabama, so I'm not sure it's going to get as much
national
attention.
Probably?
Yeah, probably not.
Good point. It could be the afternoon game, though.
It could be
like the 2:30.
They could use the doubleheader that day, the second doubleheader on CBS.
I'd be good with 2:30 kickoff if I have to go to that game.
Yeah, and by the way, nothing on the postseason ban yet. We didn't save it for the end of the show.
Nothing. Yeah, we should at some point.
Yeah,
oh,
at
by
some
the
point
way,
we could. Oh, by the way, it just came out. All right, that's going to do it for this week of Tiger Sidelines. For Matt and Bill and Brian, who's somewhere, this is Dave Manner. That's Gabe DeArmond. I'm Bo Bayman. Thanks for watching Tiger Sidelines, as always, right here on MC22.